This recording has been made through collaboration between Central Bedfordshire SENDIAS and Suffolk SENDIAS. It is divided into sections which we hope reflect the main questions which young people with special educational needs and disabilities, or SEND, and their parents and carers may want answered. It is a long recording, so you may find it easier to watch it in several goes, and we've numbered the slides and created a contents to make it easier for you to find different sections. This recording will explore what the law expects to happen before an Education, Health and Care, or EHC Needs Assessment is considered, and this will be from slide 6. We're going to look at the purpose and threshold of an EHC Needs Assessment and when one might be requested, from slide 12. Who can request one and how a request can be made, from slide 19. We're going to look at why the local authority might refuse a request and what options you would have, from slide 38. And what happens if an EHC Needs Assessment is agreed, how you and your child are involved, and what happens at the end of the process, from slide 45. And we'll also be looking at the purpose of an EHC plan. We'll start this recording with looking at some key points of law which underpin the Education, Health and Care process. The Children and Families Act of 2014 brought in wide-ranging legislation, with some of the most important reforms being about special educational needs and disabilities, or SEND. This Act puts a duty on education, health and social care to work together to support children and young people with SEND. So local authorities must have arrangements in place to plan and commission education, health and social care services jointly for children and young people with SEN or disabilities, and they must promote, encourage the integration of education and training with health and social care. If agreed, an EHC Needs Assessment now involves a duty for information and advice to be sought from health and social care, as well as education, to unpick what all the factors might be which are making it difficult for a child or young person to learn. Section 19 of the Children and Families Act says that local authorities must have regard to the views, wishes and feelings of the child, young person or adult, and parents or those with parental responsibility. They must have regard to the importance of them participating as fully as possible in decisions around SEND. Also, the importance of them having the information and support that they need in order to participate. And the need to support them so that the pupil can achieve the best possible educational and other outcomes. These participation principles lie at the base of the SEND Code of Practice of 2015. This recording will refer frequently to the Special Educational Needs and Disability, or SEND, Code of Practice of 2015. This is statutory guidance, which means it comes directly from law and gives more detail about how the law will be put into practice. It was updated following the Children and Families Act of 2014, and the guidance applies to children and young people between the ages of 0 and potentially 25 years, as long as the young person is still in some kind of learning or training and there are still difficulties with their learning. The SEND Code applies to local authorities, including social care, clinical commissioning groups and NHS trusts and local health boards. It applies to the governing bodies of schools, further education and sixth form colleges, the proprietors of academies, including free schools, to the management committees of pupil referral units, or PRUs, and early years funded by the local authority. It includes guidance for education settings on the graduated support for pupils with SEND and those with more complex needs. You can download the SEND Code for free, but it is very long. If you do download it, Chapter 9 is all about EHC Needs Assessments, EHC Plans and annual reviews. So what does the SEND Code of Practice expect to happen before an EHC Needs Assessment is even considered? And we know that many parents want to be clear about this. The law expects that the needs of the majority of children with special educational needs or disabilities to be met within what's known as the graduated cycle of SEND support. This is a 4-stage cycle, starting with the educational setting working with you to assess the needs of your child before exploring and agreeing with you and as far as possible your child what support your child will need. Then in the 3rd stage of do, the learning setting gets on and puts the strategies and the SEND support plan in place before the final, really important stage of review, where families and settings look at how effective the support plan has been and agree together what might need to change going forward. The SEND Code says that parents should have clear information about the impact of the support and the interventions or strategies provided, enabling them to be involved in planning next steps. If you would like to understand more about this graduated cycle of SEND support, there is a lot of information on our SENDIAS website under the sections Resources and Frequently Asked Questions. Information can also be found on Central Bedfordshire Council local offer web pages. The SEND Code is clear that nurseries, schools and further education colleges must use their best endeavours to make sure that a child with SEN gets the support they need. This means doing everything they can to meet children and young people's SEN. Individual schools can offer support in different ways. Indeed, the physical environment can make a difference to what they can offer. What is important is that they can demonstrate that they are doing all they can. High quality teaching, differentiated, that means adjusted for individual pupils, is the first step in responding to pupils who have or may have special educational needs. The SEND Code of Practice says, where a pupil continues to make less than expected progress, despite evidence-based support and interventions matched to the pupil's area of need, the school should consider involving specialists, including those secured by the school itself or from outside agencies. In our county of Central Bedfordshire, there are a number of specialist services which can support schools to support pupils. These might include the Educational Psychology Service, the outreach support from the Jigsaw Service, which is for young people who may be at risk of exclusion, advisory teachers for young people with ASD, the hearing and visual impairment services, speech and language therapists, the medical needs service for young people struggling to access school due to their health needs, the early years SEND service for children under 5 years of age, and early intervention support from local special schools. So what is the purpose of an Education, Health and Care, or EHC, Needs Assessment? Firstly, let's bust a myth which we have heard shared by parents and also by practitioners. EHC Needs Assessments do not bring more funding in themselves, but they may identify new, previously unrecognised needs, and these new needs may provide the evidence for more SEN funding. EHC Needs Assessments help identify the education, health and care needs which are causing barriers to learning, and they help identify the support which may be required to meet these needs and help the children and young people achieve their goals and aspirations. So if a child has health or care needs but no special educational needs, an EHC Needs Assessment will not be agreed. If a child has significant medical needs but does not require any special educational support, they can instead have an individual healthcare plan, or IHP, which will set out how these needs can be supported. This is different to education, health and care plans. The government guidance supporting pupils at school with medical conditions of 2015 explains the purpose of an individual healthcare plan and how you, your child, school and one or more health practitioners can work together to explore and agree what recommendations need to be included in an IHP. This is to make sure that all staff know how to support your child's medical needs. These IHPs are especially important for children with life-threatening conditions like allergies which may lead to anaphylactic shock. The kind of health practitioner who might be involved in helping put an IHP together could be a school nurse, or perhaps a specialist nurse for ADHD or epilepsy. The organisation Health Conditions in School Alliance has lots of templates for IHPs for specific conditions. And this slide includes a picture of just one of the pages in an IHP template to give you an idea of the information that might be included. Now, our service is often asked what the legal threshold is for an EHC Needs Assessment. The law says that a local authority must secure or do an EHC Needs Assessment if it considers that the child or young person has or may have special educational needs, or SEN, and it may be necessary for special educational provision or support to be made in accordance with an EHC plan. So in other words, if there is a possibility that a child has SEN which could need support which goes beyond the resources and advice routinely available to a setting. So common reasons for requesting an EHC Needs Assessment are that there is little or no progress despite support and specialist advice and the best endeavours from the setting, or that there are gaps in knowledge and it's not known what the needs are, and an assessment is the only way to make your child or young person's needs clear, or it's already clear that the setting will need help from the local authority to provide the support and perhaps specialist equipment which is needed. So who can request an EHC Needs Assessment? The following people have a specific right in law to request an EHC Needs Assessment: the child's parent or someone with parental responsibility, and they can make the request for a child under 16, including a child aged between 0 to 5 years, if they believe that their child will need extra help at nursery or when they start school. Also, a young person over the age of 16 but under 25 years can make a request, or the educational setting. In addition, the SEND code says that anyone else can bring a child or young person who has or may have special educational needs to the attention of the local authority, particularly where they think an EHC Needs Assessment may be necessary. So, for example, a GP, or a family support practitioner, or physiotherapist, or a swimming teacher can contact the Family Services team in the local authority and say why they think an EHC Needs Assessment would be helpful for the child or young person that they are working with. Under the Children and Families Act, a child will become a young person once they reach the end of compulsory school age. In other words, once they have passed the last Friday of June in the academic year in which they turn 16. At that point, the parental rights under the law switch to them. The SEND code says that local authorities and practitioners should normally communicate directly with the young person at this point. But the SEND code is also clear that the young person's family, especially their parents, should continue to be involved in discussions. The young person may also ask for the help of their parents throughout the EHC process. Some parents may worry that their child may not have the mental capacity to make this decision themselves. Key points from law to remember are that mental capacity is assessed in relation to a particular decision which needs to be made. So a young person who is unable to make one decision may be able to make another different decision. Also, a person must be assumed to have capacity unless there is evidence that they are not able to make this particular decision, and all steps should be taken to support the young person to make the decision before deciding that they can't. And the Mental Capacity Act is clear that a person is not to be treated as unable to make a decision just because they make an unwise decision. In other words, a young person with special educational needs and disabilities has as much right to make a mistake as any young person who does not have SEND. We do appreciate that many parents feel quite worried about this, so do contact our SENDIA service if you'd like to talk this through in more detail. So how do you actually make a request for an EHC Needs Assessment? To begin the process, a request is usually made by the learning setting, but as we said earlier, you and a young person have a right to make a request directly too. We would recommend that you talk to the learning setting if you are thinking about an EHC Needs Assessment, as the local authority will need to contact them. In Central Bedfordshire, to make a request, you can write to or email the Central Bedfordshire Send team. You may wish to use a model letter template or create your own. At Sendias, we're happy to send you model templates to use, and if needed, we can help you pull together your request. Providing your views is an opportunity to describe your child in as much detail as you would like the local authority to know about them. You can provide this detail in your request letter, or you may wish to write a separate statement with your views. Do include copies of any information which you feel is relevant for your child, like school reports, behaviour support plans, or copies of exclusion letters. Also, any additional reports or documents which you believe might support your case. For example, letters of diagnosis, professional reports or recommendations, or a statement from a person who has helped your child to learn a skill. Remember, an EHC Needs Assessment is about clarifying the difficulties your child has with learning, and there may be other people outside of school who might be helping your child to learn a skill, like a Scouts leader or a swimming teacher. They may be happy to email a paragraph explaining what difficulties they have noticed and any adjustments they've had to make to help your child to learn. For example, perhaps they found they needed to give your child longer to process instructions, or maybe a sports coach has agreed for your child to wear different protective clothing because of their sensory needs. At the end of the day, you don't have to write your views if you find it difficult. Some parents or young people prefer to record their views, for example, using their mobile phone. It's really important to include your child or young person's views, as this process is all about them. Do think about these points. What have they been enjoying, and what are their dreams for the future? What kind of support has helped them most? Don't just ask them about school support here. Most parents will have been making adjustments for their child in the home environment for years, so what has your child found most helpful? For example, maybe before a trip out or a party, they really like you to explain what will happen and help them prepare. Or maybe they like to have a bath rather than a shower because they find the feel of the bath water easier to tolerate on a sensory level. Think about what they're struggling with and what might make it better. Sometimes it can help to ask your child or young person, if they woke up tomorrow and it was the best day, what would be different? There may be a member of staff in school or college who can work with your child separately to support them to share their thoughts and feelings. And remember, your child can contact our service for confidential and impartial support and advice in sharing their views. This slide shows you a couple of one-page profile templates. These can sometimes make it easier for a child or young person to focus on a few key areas. The slide refers to 2 organisations which have free templates that you can download. This slide shows a booklet created by the organisation called Preparing for Adulthood, which offers many person-centred resources for helping a child or young person to share their views. This PowerPoint and notes for how it can be used for meetings can be found on our website or by emailing our Sendias service. Each box is a slide, and children and young people can use it to email in or even present their views to schools or the local authority. PowerPoint also has the function to record your voice. So when a child or young person opens up a PowerPoint, there is a menu across the top, and if you click on Slideshow, it opens up the function to record, as this red arrow points out. Then again, some young people just might find it easiest to make a recording using their mobile phone and send that in. In this pictorial example, the child has chosen to show some approaches and resources which help them with sensory and other needs, like stroking a soft cushion or using a chew necklace to help self-regulate. There is an organisation called Mind of My Own which has a free app for young people to download. Many young people use apps all the time, so this may help them to share their views. Once a request for an EHC Needs Assessment has been made, what happens next? What can you expect? This chart shows the time frame for the whole EHC Needs Assessment process as set out in the Children and Families Act of 2014. This slide shows the time frame for this first stage in the process. So week 1 starts when the local authority receives the request for an EHC Needs Assessment. There then follows a 6-week period when the local authority ensures that they have the views of you, your child or young person, and the educational setting views to help them decide whether a needs assessment is appropriate. So what does this involve for families? When the local authority considers all the information they receive, they need to make a decision, either to agree to do an EHC Needs Assessment or to refuse. So let's just think for a moment about why a local authority might refuse to do an EHC Needs Assessment. An LA might refuse if they've not been given enough information to judge the pupil's needs. Remember, the practitioners receiving your request most likely do not know your child and are entirely reliant on the information they receive. They might refuse if they feel a nursery, school or college could offer more in terms of support and advice. Remember the 4-stage cycle of SEND support that we looked at earlier? If a support plan isn't working, the expectation is that advice is sought from outside support services. So the LA would expect to see evidence that a learning setting has done all it can within the resources and specialist advice available to them to support your child. Or they might refuse if a support strategy or involvement of a service is just beginning, and they would like to allow time to assess the impact of this intervention. Or they will refuse if they feel the pupil's needs can be reasonably met within the resources available to the setting. The SEND code says that the LA must give its reasons for their decision when it decides not to proceed with an EHC Needs Assessment. And they should also provide feedback collected during the process of considering whether an EHC Needs Assessment is necessary, and this would include evidence from professionals which the parent, young person, early years provider, school or post-16 institution may find useful. So what if you receive a letter from the LA saying that they are not going to do an EHC Needs Assessment? What options do you have? Firstly, you or your young person can ask the local authority SEND team to arrange a way forward meeting. This is an informal meeting to which the learning setting and any other person supporting you or your child can be invited. During the meeting, the SEND officer will explain the reason why the assessment was not agreed. You will have the opportunity to present more information and can ask the LA to reconsider their decision. If the LA refused because they wanted to give an intervention more time, you could choose to wait and make a fresh request in the future if needed. You or your young person could meet with the LA through formal mediation to give more context. In Central Bedfordshire, mediation is arranged through the Kids Mediation Service. Or you or your young person over 16 could register an appeal to the SEND Tribunal. At any stage in the EHC process, you can seek advice from our Central Bedfordshire SENDIAS, including if you're confused about your options and next steps. We will never tell you what to do. We explore your options and aim to give you the information and confidence so that you or your young person can make an informed decision yourselves. If you were thinking about appealing against the local authority refusal to assess, you would need to consider mediation first. Central Bedfordshire Local Authority commissioned the Kids Mediation Service to facilitate formal mediation meetings. There is lots of information on our SENDIAS website to support you if you choose to make an appeal, including links to videos to help with completing the right forms and what to expect during the process. One of our CENDIAS officers may also be able to help you via phone or email with putting together your case or supporting you at a hearing. Practitioners who may be working with your child may be able to help you. Although a school or practitioner does not have the legal right to challenge a local authority refusal to do an EHC Needs Assessment, they might be involved in supporting you or your child to gather more information to be sent to the LA. A practitioner may be able to join a phone or video conference with the LA or formal mediation to add more information or context. And a practitioner may agree to be a witness or provide a witness statement as part of a SEND tribunal appeal. But what happens if the LA does agree to do an EHC Needs Assessment? This shows the 10-week time period for the next stage in the whole 20-week process. This is from week 7 to week 17, where information and evidence is gathered. So who does the LA gather this information from? There are 2 slides for this. The local authority must seek advice and information from the child's parent or someone with parental responsibility, or the young person or adult, from the educational setting, or if this is not available, the SEND code says they must seek advice from a person with experience of teaching children and young people with special educational needs, or from a person responsible for educational provision for the child or young person. They must also seek advice and information from an educational psychologist, and the SEND code says this psychologist should also consult any other psychologists known to be involved with the child or young person. For example, some families may have paid for a private assessment recently. If a child or young person is vision or hearing impaired, the local authority will consult with a person who is qualified to teach pupils or students with these impairments. And if a young person is detained, then advice will be sought from a youth offending team. The LA must also seek advice and information from healthcare professionals with a role in relation to your child or young person's health, and from social care. If appropriate, this might include seeking information from children in need or child protection assessments, information from a looked after child's care plan, or adult social care assessments. They must also seek advice and information from any person requested by the child's parent or young person, where the LA considers it reasonable. For example, a parent could suggest that they seek information from a GP or other health professional. So this is your chance to tell the Central Bedfordshire SEND team if you feel there is a person who would be able to give useful information about your child's learning issues or any health or social care needs which you think are impacting on your child's ability to learn or to access learning. And the local authority must also seek any other advice and information considered appropriate for a satisfactory assessment. For example, early help assessments or information from the virtual school head for looked after children, or for children of members of the armed forces, they might seek information from the Children's Education Advisory Service. Note that the legal duty is to seek advice and information, not to necessarily do an assessment. I know this is confusing given the fact that it's called an EHC Needs Assessment. It's probably helpful to think of this as an information gathering process in order to assess your child's needs. Also, it's important to note that the SEND code says the LA must not seek further advice if such advice has already been provided and the person providing the advice and the LA and the child's parents or the young person are all satisfied that it is sufficient for the assessment process and remains current. So, for example, if an educational psychologist has done a full assessment in the last 6 months, then they may only need to do an observation or a focused assessment around a particular area of concern as part of this information gathering process. At the end of the day, the SEND code says that everyone needs to be satisfied that the information and advice is sufficient, it is enough. So if you are not happy, then tell the local authority why you feel they need to gather more information or advice. When it comes to health and social care, if your child is not yet known to these services, then they may contact you and possibly the educational setting to seek advice and information. They will want to find out if you or staff feel there are health or social care needs which are affecting your child's learning or your child or young person's ability to access learning. You can tell the LA in your request letter if you feel your child has health or social care needs. Health and social care should then consider whether an assessment is needed. If you feel your child needs a health or social care assessment, we recommend that you request this independently to the EHC Needs Assessment Process. Remember that weeks 1 to 6 were for deciding whether to do an EHC Needs Assessment. And then if an EHC Needs Assessment is agreed, there is a 10-week period from week 7 to week 17 when advice and information is gathered. Well, before week 17, the local authority has a good idea of whether your child will need an EHC plan. This slide shows you the latest time under normal circumstances when the local authority can issue a draft EHC plan. The local authority will write to you to tell you their decision, and if they don't issue an EHC plan, then you or the young person has a right to appeal. So just to be clear, not all EHC needs assessments will lead to an EHC plan. If the assessment identifies special educational needs which the LA feel can be reasonably met by the nursery, school or college, then they won't issue an EHC plan. The parent or young person will have the right to challenge if they don't agree with the LA's decision. So how are you and your child involved in this process? The SEND Code of Practice says local authorities must consult the child and the child's parent or the young person or adult throughout the process of assessment and production of an EHC plan. And the needs of an individual child or young person should sit at the heart of the assessment and planning process. The SEND Code says it should be clear how the child, young person or adult has contributed to the EHC plan and how their views are reflected in it. As a young person with SEND has said, "My plan is not about me without me." We know, however, that many young people find it hard to participate and to share their views. The SEND Code recognises this and says that local authorities need to make sure that young people have access to support. Your child or young person may like to speak to one of our SENDIAS officers for advice and support, perhaps in thinking about and sharing what kind of support helps them most, or helping them prepare notes, or supporting them at a meeting. When it comes to bringing the plan together, you or your child can request a meeting with a representative from Central Bedfordshire SEND team. If you would like this, school and other practitioners can also be invited to join you to look at an initial draft plan, share your views, ask questions to make sure you understand, and explore and agree possible amendments. Usually this would be a face-to-face meeting, often in the learning setting. If this is not possible, you still have the right to give your views about the draft EHC plan when you receive it, and you will be able to talk to the Central Bedfordshire SEND team about the best way this can be done during these times. This slide gives you an idea of the kind of questions parents or young people may have. Remember, no question is a silly question. An EHC plan is a tool for you and your child to use and refer to regularly. So the SEND Code says that what is written in the plan must be in clear, straightforward language that you and your child can understand. So this is an ideal opportunity to speak out if something is unclear or uses jargon. The SEND Code is also clear that an EHC plan needs to be very specific. For example, the recommended support should state exactly what the support is, who will be offering it, when your child will have that help, and for how long. So if the plan describes support which is happening daily, what does daily mean? Does it mean throughout each day or once a day for 15 minutes? If it's once a day for 15 minutes, then it needs to say so. Watch out for weaselly words in the plan like access to or opportunities for or as required, which are not clear and specific enough. The SEND code says that the assessment and planning process should be easy for children, young people and their parents or carers to understand, and should use clear, ordinary language and images. And decisions about the content of EHC plans should be made openly and collaboratively with parents, children or the young person or adult. The SEND code also says that local authorities should support and encourage the involvement of children, young people and parents or carers by giving them time to prepare for discussions and meetings, and giving time in those discussions and meetings to hear the views of children, young people and their parents. Now we've started talking about EHC plans, and you need to be clear what the purpose of an EHC plan is. The SEND code says that the purpose of the plan is to make special educational provision, this means support, to meet the special educational needs of the child, young person or adult, and to secure the best possible outcomes for them across education, health and social care, and as they get older, prepare them for adulthood. An outcome is what everyone wants your child or young person to be able to do with the agreed support in a clear time frame. So just to be clear, an EHC plan can only be issued after a child, young person or adult has gone through the process of an EHC Needs Assessment. At the end of that process, the local authority has to decide either to issue an EHC plan or not. It will issue an EHC plan if the child, young person or adult has a special educational need or disability that cannot be met by the support and advice which is usually available to their school or college. If the LA decides that your child's needs can be met within the resources and advice available to the learning setting through SEND support, it will not issue an EHC plan. Instead, they can suggest a resource agreement, which is sometimes called My Plan. Although this is not enforceable under the law, it can still be very useful for clarifying your child's needs and recommended support to address those needs. So if an EHC plan is agreed, how is it finalised? Earlier in the recording, we explained that the whole EHC Needs Assessment process takes 20 weeks, if timescales have not been impacted by the coronavirus. This slide shows you the last few weeks of the 20-week needs assessment process. If the LA decides your child needs an EHC plan, then you will receive the draft plan by week 17. You may already have been working on the draft in the meeting that we talked about earlier. When you receive the draft plan, you have 15 days to go through it and decide if you are happy with it, and you can contact our Jigsaw service if you'd like help with this. In the draft plan, section I is left blank. This section is for the name or type of educational setting. It must be left blank so that a parent or someone with parental responsibility or the young person can say what setting they would like. Then in weeks 19 and 20, the local authority must consult with the educational setting that you or your child named. That setting then has 15 days to go through the information about your child and decide whether their setting is suitable for your child's needs, abilities and age, and whether giving your child a place would be compatible, that means it would work, with the teaching of the children already on their roll, and compatible with the use of resources for all their pupils. Parents and young people can suggest changes to the draft EHC plan in weeks 17 to 18. However, sometimes changes are not all agreed. the local authority can still issue the final EHC plan in order to keep within the legal timeframe of 20 weeks. Only the parent or carer, or person with parental responsibility, or the young person has a right to appeal to the tribunal. An appeal needs to be made within 2 months of the local authority letter which gives their decision. For most appeals, you must consider mediation. Remember, there is a lot more information about appeals on our website. We've come to the end of this recording, so do take a minute to reflect on the information we've shared. Has your understanding and confidence around the EHC Needs Assessment process increased as a result? Or could we make it better for you? We want to make sure that the information we share is what you want to know and is explained in a way that makes sense to you.